Chapter 51. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Leave Liang Sini here to lay a trap. It was remarkable that Yun Shi would be so generous and kind enough to completely forgive Liang Sini for what she had done. This completely shocked the entire Yun family. They were all thinking about how Yun Shi was such a foolish girl. She was being bullied to this extent, yet she tolerated letting Liang Sini continue to live in the Yun household. Also, Liang Shuqin was obviously taking Liang Sini's side. Yun Shi was nothing in comparison, even though she was her real daughter. This girl really had no caution. Liang Shuqin was very satisfied with Yun Shi's reaction since this was her plan after all. However, Liang Sini didn't dare to feel happy right away. Although Yun Shi was a weakling, Liang Sini didn't dare to underestimate her after she'd been able to get the Jiangs to help her successfully return to the Yun family. Especially when it came to the things Yun Shi had just said, they didn't sound like something she'd say at all. Even if her wish to stay was now fulfilled, she somehow felt panic about the foggy road ahead. It was like she had stepped into an unknown forest, and while she walked toward the light the entire way, who knew what awaited her at the end of the path? She looked up at Yun Shi but discovered that the other girl was giving her a mysterious smile. Liang Sini didn't understand her smile, yet she could feel a coldness in her heart. Grandfather Yun saw that Yun Shi was being generous, and Liang Shuqin was the head of the household, so he didn't say much more before ordering the housekeeper to clear out 2 guest rooms. Within the entire family, there was one person who continued to discreetly study Yun Shi from the moment she stepped foot into the house. Yun Shi also noticed this. This person was none other than her youngest sister, Yun Chuhan. Yun Chuhan, from her previous lifetime, had been probably the most calculative person in the family who lurked from the surface. From the way Yun Shi saw it, Yun Chuhan was even more pained than herself. She and Yun Kursin were both granddaughters of the same age, yet grandfather Yun loved Yun Kursin the most. She was also Liang Shuqin's daughter, yet she loved Yun Xiling the most. Liang Shuqin had been full of expectations that Yun Chuhan would be a son, but yet she was born as a daughter. Liang Shuqin's hatred and neglect toward her was no less than what she felt for Yun Shi. Yun Chuhan had grown up in a vastly contrasting life compared to Yun Xiling. Yun Shi would probably never understand her demented psyche, despite having lived with her for more than half her life. As a result, she suffered her share from Yun Chuhan's plotting. But it didn't matter since her net had already been cast. With many big fishes, she would reel them in one by one. Yun Shi took her backpack upstairs, and her quiet footsteps echoed in her heart. From now on, she must proceed with the utmost vigilance. Yun Shi only allowed Liang Sini to stay because she needed to keep her there to control her auntie's family. If the Liangs came here to cause trouble before she properly established herself, this would disrupt her plans. She wasn't worried about Liang Sini calling home to tattle on her since she believed she would never dare to. Leaving her in the Yun household should be a very good opportunity for Liang Sini. If the Liangs caused trouble, not only would they be in the wrong, but the commotion would also insult the Yun family. This would cause Liang Sini to lose her opportunity to study in Jingdu. With Liang Sini staying in the Yun household, she may even use their connections to propel her toward higher opportunities that enabled her to marry into a rich family and enjoy a life of luxury. If she went back to the countryside, then she would really lose everything. Liang Sini was no fool, so she wouldn't do such a silly thing. Next, she would begin preparing her bait to reel in the fish. When Yun Shi went upstairs, she studied her room. It was also a guest room, but hers was more spacious and brighter than Liang Sini's and also came with a small balcony. Just as she was about to put her clothes away, she heard a noise from downstairs. When she looked down from the window, she immediately saw Liang Shuqin taking Liang Sini out. Her grandfather had just asked Liang Shuqin to take the 2 girls to buy some new clothes. Liang Sini was already in the car, but no one had even bothered telling Yun Shi anything. She was obviously lesser than a niece, even though she was the actual daughter. She scoffed quietly before taking the clothes out from her backpack and putting them away. She was surprised to see something that didn't belong to her squashed at the bottom of her clothes. It was a lambskin roll with a unique badge printed in steel. Wasn't this the set of surgical knives she'd seen inside Mu Feiqi's first aid kit? When had he stuffed it into her bag? Chapter 52. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A great method to hit two birds with one stone. Because Yun Shi was far too acquainted with Yun Xiling's greedy nature, she hadn't taken Miss Chen's international brand name clothes when she'd left the Chen's home. She'd only taken 2 casual outfits so she could wear them for her morning runs. She was fully aware that her body couldn't be too delicate and weak, so she insisted on waking up early every morning to run along the mountain road surrounding the villa complex. Jianye Mountain was Mu Feiqi's territory, so she didn't dare to run too far into it. She would only go as far as the established sentry post before going back. Early the next morning, she returned home after the morning run. Then she proceeded to change into an outfit she'd brought from the countryside before going downstairs for breakfast. Grandfather Yun saw Yun Shi's shabby outfit, then glanced at the beautifully dressed Liang Xini. His face was instantly twisted into an ugly expression. What is going on? Didn't I ask you to take Yun Shi to go buy new clothes? Liang Xiuqin shot a glance at Yun Shi before lying boldly, I did call for her, but she hid in her room without answering me at all. I wasn't sure if she was unwilling to go out with me or if she just despises me, so I just let her be. After all, she is the one to wear those clothes, not me. After all the commotion last night, Grandfather Yun assumed Yun Shi was feeling bitter, so he turned to look at her and began acting as the peacemaker. Yun Shi. Yun Shi sneered internally to herself, but she kept an unreadable smile on her face. Grandfather, I went downstairs as soon as I put down my backpack, but my mom and Xini had already driven off in the car before I could even get downstairs. They didn't even wait for me. I knew that Mom was also responsible for cousin's toiletries, so that meant there is an additional set of expenses for the household. That's okay, though. I'm all right with dressing simply. Her mom was telling a lie and trying to make her take the blame for it, so why shouldn't she learn how to instigate things? How could this be? You are the eldest heiress of the Yuns. Why would it make sense for an outsider to dress better than you? Grandfather Yun slammed the chopsticks down on the dining table, frightening everyone. Before they could even compose themselves, they heard Grandfather Yun berating Liang Xiuqin. Yun Shi is your own daughter, how could you act like this as her mother? You treat her worse than an outsider, and if you keep treating her like this, don't even dream of her being filial to you once she marries into the Jiang family. You're so happy to help someone else raise their daughter, but don't forget that she's still someone else's. If you keep acting like this, there will be plenty of time for you to regret it in the future. Liang Xiuqin had originally thought that she could distance herself from the situation, so she didn't expect Grandfather Yun to see through her and sternly berate her in front of everyone, making her lose all face. Dad, why are you throwing such a big temper tantrum so early in the morning? Her second aunt, Yao Ying, took the opportunity to chime in. After we finish breakfast, I'll drive Yun Shi out to buy some new clothes. Liang Xiuqin had always hated seeing Yao Ying pretend to be a goody. Shoes, so she icily retorted, she is a star of death and will bring misfortune to the family, so you'd better be careful she doesn't curse your sickly husband. Xiuqin, how could you say such things? The word sickly truly triggered Yao Ying, and with Liang Xiuqin's reminder, she lost any desire to help Yun Shi. What are you arguing about? You all need to shut up. Grandfather Yun shouted before scoffing and standing up. Yun Shi, come to my study after breakfast. Okay, Grandfather. As soon as Grandfather Yun left, Yun Chuhan gave a sarcastic smirk. She was able to see that her oldest sister wasn't as simple as she appeared. She had made an impressive play at the dining table, winning the round by retreating and making the kill while acting as the victim. Not only had she used Grandfather Yun's authority to teach her mother a lesson, but she'd also made him hate the outsider, Liang Xini, even more. She'd hit 2 birds with 1 stone, what a great method. She gained sympathy points from her grandfather, so her grandfather gave her double compensation for the things her mother had stolen from her. Yun-shi looked up to see Yun Chuhan staring pointedly at her with a half-dot smile. She didn't understand her mysterious dot-looking expression. A feeling of unease rose in Yun Chuhan's stomach, so she quickly put her head down. Yun-shi smirked. After finishing breakfast, she went directly upstairs and completely ignored the enraged Liang Shuqin inside the dining room. Chapter 53. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Master Mu returns just as Yun-shi had expected. Her grandfather gave her 1,000 renminbi in private so she could go buy clothes and school supplies on her own. Yun-shi didn't play coy, so she accepted the money. It was actually a good thing that Liang Shuqin had left her behind. Otherwise, Liang Shuqin probably wouldn't have bought her anything good even if she had taken her shopping. With 1,000 renminbi, she would have enough to buy several outfits. Her mom had suffered a great injustice, so she would certainly find a way to make Yun-shi pay for it. Grandfather, I only want to study hard right now and get into a good university. It doesn't matter what I wear. Yesterday, I saw there were some of grandmother's unworn clothes in the storage closet downstairs. I can pick out something that fits, then buy new ones if I still need them. What do you think? She knew that her grandfather had experienced hard times in the past. Even though he was older now, he still maintained the fine tradition of men, living frugally and simply. He hated nothing more than to see money being wasted in the household. Grandfather Yun finally recalled this and felt bad for his granddaughter, who had never enjoyed any love from their family. He sighed quietly. Those are old clothes your grandmother wasn't able to wear when she was young, so they probably won't be fashionable for young girls today. That's okay. Money needs to be spent on unnecessary things. Yun-shi already knew from her previous lifetime that she was an heiress of a silk-making family in Jiangnan, so she had brought many clothes as her dowry. The age-old brocade silks were much higher quality than what could be purchased nowadays. In her grandmother's age, fashion trends were beginning to become westernized. Chinese frog buttons paired with long dresses were becoming increasingly fashionable. The improved vintage frog buttons and long dresses would perhaps seem a bit old-fashioned in this age. However, in Yun-shi's previous lifetime, Jingdu had been swept up with a vintage wave. But when those simple and elegant frog-buttoned, vintage long dresses had been modified into loose and flowy long dresses, the frog buttons, slanted collar, and flowy dresses had appeared beautiful and magical. When Yun-shi typically conducted experiments or research, she wore loose and flowy frog-buttoned, vintage long dresses. She appeared casual yet extremely elegant. Grandfather agreed, so she went to ask the housekeeper for help bringing out a box of clothes from the storage closet. Though the silk material had endured the years, it still felt as good as new. Her grandmother had never even worn these clothes before, so it was only considered as her dowry. Liang Shuqin saw her taking out old clothes from the storage closet to wear, so she assumed Yun-shi was unable to get any benefits from grandfather Yun. She didn't hide the smugness on her face. She stood on the staircase as she jeered, a country bumpkin will be a country bumpkin, after all. You even want to wear the clothes of a dead person. You're not afraid of bad luck at all. Yun-shi ignored her. She touched the precious silk dresses and quite liked them a lot. Her second aunt watched this from the stairs, and she waited for Liang Shuqin to go upstairs before discreetly passing a few hundred RMB to Yun-shi. Your second uncle has poor health, and I have no time, so you can go buy some new clothes when you have time. Her own mother was so harsh, so Yaoing felt very bad for this poor child. Thank you, second aunt. Yun-shi looked at the money in her hand, her mind slightly wavering. Regardless of what reason her second aunt had for treating Yun-shi kindly, at least she was once kind to her when she was at her weakest and most helpless. Mu Mansion stood on the peak of Tianyu Mountain. In the night, the massive mansion was illuminated throughout. The entire place was as bright as day, and it was impressive yet particularly domineering. As opposed to the luxurious curves of European-style architecture, the entire mansion was composed of white walls and black shingles. There were flying eaves and corbelled columns, as well as miniature bridges and flowing water. As far as the eye could see, there was a magnificent modern, Chinese-style courtyard. It was elegant and calm, exuding a different charm. Above the helicopter pad at the entrance, a helicopter was flying down from the night sky. After it steadily landed on the pad, a dark shadow jumped down from it. When the sound of the propellers could be heard, the housekeeper was already waiting at the door. "Master Mu." The housekeeper quickly walked up to him. Under the bright lights in the courtyard, Mu Feiqi wore a dark green, casual outfit. Wearing black boots, he stepped on the stone paths with firm strength. As he walked over, he took off his dust-covered jacket and threw it to the housekeeper. Under his dark green shirt was a powerful physique that was full of the energy of the sun. "Go down to the villa complex at the base of the mountain tomorrow and investigate someone for me. Master Mu, please tell me who this person is. Go check to see if the eldest heiress of the Yuns has returned home yet." "Ha! Master Mu." The housekeeper seemed to want to say more when he mentioned this Miss Yun. Mu Feiqi stood on the staircase and stopped in his tracks before turning around. His dark brows frowned slightly. "Say what you want to say. When did you become so reluctant to speak?" "The eldest heiress of the Yuns you are referring to goes for morning runs every day. She would go as far as the sentry post before running back." Chapter 54. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The itch in Master Mu's heart. Miss Yun runs up the mountain every morning, then goes home after reaching the sentry post. There were many of Mu Feiqi's contacts inside the villa complex, so even the security team was arranged by them. Jianyu Mountain was fully aware whenever something happened underneath. "She only comes to the sentry post." Mu Feiqi was a bit surprised. Everyone under the mountain risked their lives and used all methods to attempt climbing up. The young girl had just returned, so she probably didn't know who lived on the mountain peak, yet she somehow knew her place. Though there was no particular reason, he felt a trace of disappointment. After all, the little creature had been able to battle against the wolf pack. He was somewhat looking forward to seeing if she had the ability to go up the mountain. The entire mountain was covered with sentries and ambushes, so it was unlikely that even two of his dexterous underlings would be able to come up the mountain safely. He actually felt some anticipation for that little creature. "Right. I watched the surveillance footage, and she didn't approach or show curiosity. She only runs around the perimeter before going back. Also, the villa complex is in an uproar because of what happened with her a few days ago." "What happened?" "It sounds like her cousin came here from the countryside to replace her, so she was accused of being a thief by her mother and got kicked out. Afterward, this seemed to have alerted grandfather Jiang, and he took her to the house, but they ended up being rejected by her mother again. Grandfather Yun was the one to personally escort her home. The entire incident had been circulated around the entire villa complex, so everyone feels very bad for the young girl." Mu Feiqi squinted slightly, a trace of iciness appearing on his chiseled features. He didn't believe that that girl would be so easily bullied. She'd been able to use grandfather Zhang's influence to return home, so she didn't seem like a fool at all. He waved a hand before going upstairs. Since he was back now and she was right under his eyes, he quite missed that little creature with the claws. She'd been relentless when she'd tickled him, and she'd even elicited a bit of itchiness at the bottom of his heart. Yunxi woke up at exactly 6 a.m. every day for her morning runs. There were still many things she must do in this lifetime, so she couldn't allow her weak body to drag her down. There were two paths from the villa complex to the sentry post halfway up the mountain. One was the main road that Mu Feiqi's vehicles used to drive up the mountain, while the other was a back road taken by all the guards of the sentry posts throughout the entire mountain. It only allowed for one off-road vehicle to pass at a time. But today, perhaps she should have checked her daily fortune before leaving the house. As she ran, a shadow suddenly bounded out from behind her. She was instantly scared silly. Although she knew there were many sentry posts and guards on the mountain, she had already run peacefully for so many days. When a person suddenly appeared so early in the morning, she was truly frightened by them. When she was able to clearly see the person running with her, she instantly screeched to a stop. Covering her forehead, she couldn't help but roll her eyes as she panted in deep breaths. Master Mu, you ran down the mountain so early in the morning just to scare me. That seems a bit unkind. She dared to guarantee that he would never appear on this road at all. You're frightened just like that. I thought you looked pretty brazen. He looked around at his surroundings, then studied the little creature he hadn't seen for several days now. She'd only run for 1 kilometer, yet she was already huffing so badly she couldn't catch her breath. Her physique was especially terrible. Her pink and tender face was a bit red because she struggled to catch her breath. Like a ripe peach, it exuded an alluring charm. Compared to gaudy and cheap women who delivered themselves to his door, this young girl possessed an aura so innocent, it was absolutely beautiful. Although she appeared shy, she was also very tempting. Especially when her watery eyes sparkled with starlight and her brows curved into a smile, there seemed to be a whirlpool that could suck a human's soul down into it. Mu Feiqi was completed by an urge as he suddenly reached out to pinch her pink and tender cheek. She was totally confused by his movement that came out of the blue. Chapter 55. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fair, pretty, and easily pushed over nonsense. In all her life, she had never been so intimate with a man before. But somehow, he took advantage of her over and over again. Also, why on earth was Master Mu nibbling and kissing her face? She was being sexually harassed in the middle of the day. Yunxi's mind exploded instantly. With a red face, she carefully pushed away the man with his mouth on her. If she was merely a country girl, she would have probably run away scared. Fortunately, she already experienced a lifetime of grievances and grudges, so she could compose herself no matter how awkward the situation was. Master Mu, you probably haven't had breakfast yet and are feeling so hungry that you set your sights on me. Mu Feiqi composed himself, his eyes dark as he watched her eyes that reflected a more suggestive look than before. Her voice also seemed to be raspier and sexier as well. Hungry. He raised a brow as he leaned a bit closer to her. With their height differences, Yunxi had to incline her head slightly to see him. In her era, this kind of height difference was considered the most adorable kind. She would still grow taller, so she wouldn't need to look up to him anymore. Mu Feiqi patted her head, a barely detectable look of adoration appearing in his eyes. Little creature, for a man, hunger doesn't only refer to here. He stabbed a finger at his own chest, then continued to point to a certain flirtatious place. Humor lurked in his eyes, there's also here. Yunxi instantly understood what he was implying, so her face flushed red, and all the blood in her body became chaotic. She widened her eyes slightly and exhaled sharply. Biting on her lip, she was only able to calm down after a very long time. Now, she finally understood why so many people were so eager for this swift acting Master Mu. Not only was this man gorgeous, but he was a total expert when it came to flirting. She suddenly recalled how Han Wanling had drugged him in the forest and coughed awkwardly. Master Mu, are you blaming me for what happened when I saw you being drugged in the forest? That I shouldn't have rescued you since I ended up interrupting your excitement. From the looks of him right now, that was very possible. There was a difference in age between them, but after having lived 2 lifetimes, Yunxi did have some idea about how men had biological needs that required release. She really had done a good deed for nothing. I'm not blaming you. Han Wanling really made me lose my appetite. I wouldn't want her even if she delivered herself to my door. Mu Feiqi pressed his thin lips together, his pitch-black eyes reflecting Yunxi's image as he reached out to pinch her chin and shake it gently. Your type is exactly to my taste. Ha! Yun Shi's smile froze on her face, her hands trembling as she pushed away his huge hand. All men like women who are fair, pretty, and easily pushed over. Unfortunately, I'm not like that. A little, immature girl like me isn't suitable for you. You're Master Mu of China, and if you waved a hand, a ton of women would deliver themselves to you. You don't need to make yourself suffer. Yun Shi could cross anyone, but she must never cross this man. Although the Mu family was a very good source of support, she didn't need them. She could accumulate her own support and network, bit by bit. She believed that she had the ability and strength to do it, so she didn't need to ask for someone else's help. Fair, pretty, and easily pushed over. Raising a brow, he slowly reached out to pull the little creature before him into his embrace. He pressed her tightly against his chest. Pinching her chin, he forced her to look straight up at himself. Aren't you exactly like that? Nonsense. Must he use her own words against her? Yun Shi struggled for a bit and finally escaped from his claws with great difficulty. Retreating a few steps, she kept a safe distance away from him. With your tiny body, you are surely easy to push over. If you want to become stronger, morning runs alone won't be enough. You also need proper nutrition to keep up with it. Her body was too skinny and weak, so she probably had suffered lots in the countryside. Even though she'd already returned to the Yun family, she still wouldn't have a very good life with that harsh and unloving mother. I know that. She studied medicine, so why wouldn't she understand? Starting from tomorrow, run up all the way to the peak. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You're the first person. Why's that? Yun Shi shot him a cautious look. Come to Mu Mansion to see me. No, thanks. It's too far, and not only am I too weak to run up there, but I would probably be killed off by your guards before I even got halfway up. If you can defeat them and get up to the peak, I will grant you one wish. He was very curious to see her true abilities. Since she'd been able to calmly, swiftly, and viciously battle against the wolf pack, it didn't look like she hadn't trained before. Also, he could tell that she was the type of person who appeared quiet but would make a big splash once she showed her true colors. If he could learn about her abilities, it would make it easier for him to get to know her. Unfortunately, Yun Shi didn't know that, at that moment, Master Mu had already cast an intricate web and patiently waited for her to fall into his clutches. Yun Shi didn't want to get too involved with him, so she retorted in exasperation, Master Mu, you haven't even repaid me for saving your life, and you already plan on racking up a tab. She wasn't someone who needed to flatter him. While he was Master Mu of China, he wasn't anyone to her. She didn't need to ask for anything from him. He poked her pink cheek and smiled lovingly. Little creature, you were the one to end up in my wolf lair. I think I was the one to rescue you. Within all of China, he was the first person who had ever dared to bargain with her. Yun Shi squinted her eyes and gritted her teeth. Fine, we can call it even. If you are concerned about me disrupting the peace on your Jianyu mountain, then I won't be running here tomorrow. Mu Feiqi pressed his thin lips together, his dark brows furrowing. Iciness formed in his dark and bottomless eyes. Other people use all means possible to get up the mountain. Little creature, you're telling me you don't want to come at all. While I may be able to grant you something, this is actually an honor that other people may not necessarily have. Then that's more the reason I wouldn't dare to accept it. The heavens never grant gifts, but only lay traps. Master Mu, I'm already past the stage of being a gullible little girl. In all my life, no one has ever rejected me before. Little creature, you're the first one. Then I'm very honored to be this first person to do it. You're not worried about me visiting your home. If I were to go to your house, then you would become much more valuable in the eyes of the Yun family. You. Though she'd met people who wanted to pick a fight, she'd never met anyone who picked fights for her. Yun Shi suppressed the urge to beat Mu Feiqi and breathed in deeply. He was fully aware of her circumstances. She didn't need the sympathy or pity of others, but why did he have to use such methods to threaten her? He was threatening her with something he was adamant about giving out, but not something he wanted to obtain. Nonsense. She shouldn't have rescued him in the first place. If she'd allowed him and Han Wanling to fool around, then he probably wouldn't have set his sights on her. She hadn't even established herself firmly within the Yun family yet, so the Yuns would certainly take advantage of her arranged marriage with the Jiangs. But if they learned about her involvement with Master Mu of China, then the entire Yun family would turn upside down. A connection with Master Mu would bring more than 10 times the benefits the Jiangs could offer. She didn't want them to reap too many benefits. She must maintain control of the situation and not let Mu Feiqi obtain it. Otherwise, she would be under his control. Okay then. I'll go up to the peak tomorrow. If I win, I will accept your generosity. However, I have a condition. Mu Feiqi curled his lips into a subtle smile. I must commend her for having the courage to bargain with me at a time like this, he thought. Go on. He stared pointedly at her angry face. She was delicate and cute, completely unblemished by the world. But when she negotiated with him, her relentless and uncompromising stubbornness made his heart itch. He felt so itchy that it made him want to conquer it. Don't force me to go to the Mu mansion every day. I don't want other people to know that I know you, nor do I want to be taken advantage of by them. Okay. He understood what she was saying and was also fully aware of her circumstances. He genuinely felt bad for this little creature. He was only granting her one wish after all. As the great Master Mu of China, he actually had to use threats and temptation too. She was truly a lot of trouble. Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Because I have a good fortune. Yun Yuanfeng returned from a business trip. By the time he met his eldest daughter, whom he hadn't seen in over 10 years, it had already been 5 days since Yun Shi had returned to the Yun family. In the past few days, the entire villa complex was in an uproar because of the earlier incident of the real and fake Yun Shis. Now everyone knew that the eldest heiress of the Yun family was home. It was also because of Liang Xinyi's previous attempt to replace her and Liang Shuqin's superstition that had caused everyone from the villa complex to feel disdain and disgust toward the methods of this aunt and niece pair. Liang Shuqin's identity within the villa complex had been awkward to begin with. After all, the Yun family hadn't been able to present a respectable title in this area. Grandfather Yun was only a minor character, and it was all thanks to Grandfather Zhang's support that their family could all live in the villa complex. Especially since Liang Shuqin was from the countryside and her parents had died early, she had no support or esteemed background. Since she'd married Yun Yuanfeng, it had been obvious that she was very impressive compared to the people from Muyang. However, she couldn't have exactly shown off anything with the villa complex. She had worked hard to maintain the image of the wife of the deputy director for over 10 years, yet it had been destroyed in one day. She'd originally intended to steal the arranged marriage from Yun Shi and marry her second daughter into the Jiang family. That way, they could rely on a powerful family like the Jiangs. But with all this commotion, not only had she failed to steal the marriage, but she'd also ended up offending the Jiangs. Even her reputation beyond the villa complex had been ruined by the gossip circulated by the other older women. Yun Shi, that wretched girl, was truly a star of death. She'd caused Liang Shuqin to be humiliated and lose all face. Even her husband, Yun Yuanfeng, was suffering pressure from his bosses at the office. If this wretched girl hadn't come back, would they even have had to face all these terrible things? Yun Yuanfeng hadn't felt much emotion when he saw his eldest daughter. He'd already had 3 daughters, so it didn't matter if one was missing. But this daughter implicated his career prospects, as well as support from the Jiang family. He must help her for now, even if he didn't like her. The mess caused by Liang Shuqin had caused him to fall into a worrying situation. Yun Yanfeng was truly enraged, so he directly scolded Liang Shuqin. Neither of them had expected that the wretched girl would earn grandfather Zhang's favor as well as make the Chens owe her for saving their son's life. Who would have thought that wretched girl would get such random good luck? With her fortune as the star of death, I was still worried. You're stupidly superstitious. If her fortune was truly that terrible, you think the Jiangs would accept her. And it would be such a coincidence for her to rescue the eldest heir of the Chens as well. Why can't you grow a brain? Could she really be a star of death if she was able to instantly gain the support of 2 of the 4 great clans? Yun Shi passed by their room when she went downstairs, so she overheard them arguing and stopped in her tracks. After listening carefully for some time, she understood why her father had rushed back so quickly. It was probably because grandfather Jiang had asked the senior management to give Yun Yuan phone trouble. Since they were arguing so fiercely, Yun Shi predicted her father would soon be begging her for something. She scoffed before going downstairs. When she turned the corner, she saw Liang Sini and Yun Xiling standing side by side and blocking the stairs. They looked like they were here to pick a fight. Yun Xiling put on the airs as an heiress, raising her hand to push Yun Shi viciously. Wretched girl, can't you see that mom and dad are fighting because of you? It was all thanks to this little tch that her parents were fighting as soon as her dad had come home. Yun Shi had the looks of a cursed girl, yet her grandfather was actually siding with her. Yun Shi slightly retreated up 2 steps to haughtily look down at Yun Xiling's proud face. I didn't see it, but I did hear it. What does that have to do with me? If mom and cousin didn't collude to anger grandfather Jiang, would things have gone to this extent? If you need to vent your anger on someone, turn your head to the right. The culprit is standing right there. When Liang Sini heard her name being mentioned, she also chimed in to support Yun Xiling in order to express her position. Wretched girl. If it hadn't been for you refusing to give up that day, would things have turned into such a mess? It's all because you had the Jiangs come here and make the entire villa complex see us as a big joke. She's your own mother, but you hurt her so badly. You have no conscience at all. You said it as well. She's my mother, not yours. What right do you have to replace me? Because Auntie likes me, and because I have a better fortune than you. Chapter 58. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Pain is forgotten after the scar heals, because Auntie likes me, and because I have a better fortune than you. Is that so? Cousin, I think you've forgotten the pain after the scar healed. Don't forget who was the one who agreed on letting you stay in Jingdu. Messing with me won't do you any good. You think I'm scared of you? Right now, Auntie is letting me stay in the Yun household. This has nothing to do with you at all. With her auntie supporting her, why would Liang Sini be afraid of Yun Shi? Yun Shi glanced at Liang Sini, who considered herself to share the same enemy as Yun Xiling. It was true that people cut from the same cloth tended to stick together. Okay. Yun Shi nodded before giving her a suggestive smile. She didn't bother wasting any more breath on her before pushing Liang Sini away and going downstairs. Dealing with Liang Sini was not a difficult thing for Yun Shi at all. She would only have to use a few tricks to send Liang Sini scrambling back to the countryside. However, she didn't want to let her off so easily. Compared to having Liang Sini return to the countryside, it was much more secure to leave her right under Yun Shi's eyes. At such a young age, Liang Sini already wanted nothing but a bright future of marrying into a wealthy family. But were wealthy families truly that easily married into? Education, cultivation, character, and identity were all extremely important traits. In her previous lifetime, Liang Sini had used dirty tricks to marry into a wealthy family. And thanks to Chen Lishue's instigation, Liang Sini had had a terrible relationship with her mother-in-law, and her husband had flagrantly cheated on her. Liang Sini and Chen Lishue would play out the drama of catching mistresses every day. Although Yun Shi could also make Liang Sini suffer through such a tumultuous life this time around as well, she didn't want to let her off so easily. This was all because of what she'd said today. Liang Sini desired a life of luxury and was obsessed with superficial fame and fortune, so Yun Shi would allow her to climb higher before viciously pushing her back down. For the pain Yun Shi had endured when she'd fallen off the cliff, she would make Liang Sini suffer it 100 and 1,000 times more. The most painful life wasn't turmoil and unrest, but losing everything and having her reputation destroyed. At lunchtime, Yun Shi saw her dad pass a paper envelope to her. She could already guess what was inside. "Yun Shi, you've just returned and Dad has no time to take you shopping. Take this money to buy clothes and school supplies, and when you have time, you can buy some gifts and visit Grandfather Jiang at his home." Suddenly, everyone at the dining table stopped chatting. Yun Xiling and Yun Chuhan's eyes especially bulged at the sight of that thick envelope. There must be at least 1,000 or 2,000, if not 5,000 renminbi inside. Their dad had never given them so much money before. Even for their living allowances, they'd only received 500 or 600 renminbi every week. A one-time amount of several thousand RMB was considered a huge sum of money to them. Liang Shuqin felt as if her flesh was being cut at the sight of that wad of cash. She hadn't been able to glean any benefits from that wretched girl, yet she'd ended up losing her own money on her. Yun Shi looked up to play dumb. "I just came back from Grandfather Zhang's a few days ago. I heard that he'd recently been invited to be a general counselor, so he shouldn't be home for a while." "He's not home. Then." Yun Yuanfeng fell into a panic, then considered it before setting his sights on the Chen family. "Didn't you rescue Mr. Chen? You also need to visit the Chens more often." "Okay, I understand. I'll go visit Mr. Chen tomorrow and check on his condition." She paused, then looked up to look at Liang Shuqin before glancing at the wad of cash used to elicit favors. She purposely asked with Yun Yuanfeng present, "Mom, you won't ask for this money back?" Liang Shuqin had had the idea in her head, but her expression fell when the question had been posed to her. She glared viciously at Yun Shi. Yun Yuanfeng also turned around to shoot her a stern warning glance. Liang Shuqin appeared very embarrassed. "What are you saying? Your dad gave you this to buy gifts with, so why would I take it back?" Yun Shi nodded. With her dad there, her mom would never dare to reclaim the money even if she wanted to. Yun Yuanfeng still wanted Yun Shi to visit the Chens and help him elicit favors. After all, this implicated his promotion. But he also felt like it would be too embarrassing to mention it out of nowhere, so he had no choice but to change the topic by reminding Yun Shi. "Don't be too frugal when you buy the gifts or you'll embarrass our family. Do you understand?" "I understand." Chapter 59. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why didn't you let her die? Yun Yuanfeng glanced at Yun Shi's vintage long dress with the slanted collar. It was starkly different from the fashionable clothes that Yun Xiling and Yun Chuhan wore. The tender, light yellow color was crisp and bright. An elbow-length, tulle, vintage, Chinese-style dress with frog buttons was paired with a long, white skirt. The exquisite, Chinese-style tailoring preserved the natural and fluid lines, so it was vintage yet very charming. The single color wasn't embellished with any patterns, so it was elegant and flowy. Paired with her obedient and bare face, she appeared quiet with a sense of calm demure. When Yun Yuanfeng looked at her, he realized that the eldest daughter he'd never paid any attention to had somehow developed the elegance of an heiress from an esteemed family. However, her clothing didn't look like the brand-name clothes that all the modern girls liked to wear. Having just returned from the countryside, she could slowly learn about fashion if she didn't yet understand it. After all, she had two younger sisters at home who understood fashion. Yun Yuanfeng had always cared about his face and had hoped she would climb up the social ladder, so such provisions were also essential. "Xiling, don't you have some new clothes that you've never worn before? Have your sister try them on. I don't want the Chens to think that our family is not being good to your sister." "What?" Yun Xiling's face instantly turned red when she heard this. "Why should I, doesn't she know how to go buy her own clothes to wear? Why does she need to wear mine? She had begged her mom for a long time before she'd finally bought those 2 brand-name dresses for her, which were 1,000 renminbi each. She'd been saving them to wear when school started and at her birthday party, but her dad actually wanted her to let this wretched girl wear them. Why should she? Why should you? She's your sister. As if I want this star of death as my sister. She's stealing my things as soon as she comes home. She'd be better off staying in the countryside and never coming back. You need to shut your mouth. With a slam, Yun Yuanfeng slapped the chopsticks hard onto the dining table. Yun Xiling's immaturity completely enraged Yun Yuanfeng. Liang Xiuqin couldn't stand seeing Yun Xiling suffering, so she grabbed her husband. What are you doing? You've scared our child. Don't you know that her heart is weak? What if you scared her into getting sick again? Yun Xiling heard her mom mention it, so she immediately cooperated by pretending to be aggrieved and weak. Yun Shi glanced at Yun Xiling, then looked at the disdainful-looking Yun Chuhan. It appeared that the 2 sisters didn't get along that well either. Very good. This would save her some efforts. She's been spoiled rotten by you and acts like a little princess. Why can't you give your things to your own sister? If she marries into the Jiang family in the future, you may even need to rely on her to help you out. Yun Chuhan curled her lips into a sneer as she coolly watched the drama. As Yun Xiling's younger sister who'd lived with her for over 10 years, she had also yet to see Yun Xiling give anything to her. Yun Chuhan felt fortunate enough that her things hadn't been stolen away instead. Under the table, Yun Xiling balled her hands into tight fists and cast a poisonous glare at Yun Shi. She bit her lip hard. Who even wants her help? It's not like I can't get married myself. Yun Xiling felt especially aggravated whenever her heart condition was mentioned. It was because of this illness that her dreams of marrying into a wealthy family were mostly extinguished. No wealthy family would accept a daughter-in-law with a heart condition. If she were to pass the hereditary condition to the child or had difficulty giving birth, even her own survival would be doubtful. Wealthy families valued male heirs over anything else. If she couldn't fulfill this task, then she wouldn't be able to cross into the family's threshold at all. Yun Xiling became more frightened at the thought of this and also grew more aggrieved. Her future path was completely hazy. It was already unlikely she could claim the marriage into the Jiang family since Yun Shi wouldn't give the marriage up for her. The beautiful dream her mom had once crafted for her, her beautiful dream of marrying into a wealthy family, her dream of rising up in status, all were extinguished thanks to Yun Shi's return. No. She didn't want to die alone. She needed to marry well and shove Yun Shi down. She jerked her head up, her poisonous eyes directly pointing toward Yun Shi. With gritted teeth, her fingertips were pale, and she was so livid her entire body shook. It's all her fault. She was the one to curse my brother to death, and she even cursed me into having his illness. Why did you have to give birth to her? Why didn't you let her die? Letting her stay is a curse. She'll curse our entire family. Chapter 60. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aren't you too funny? Ridiculous. Yun Yuanfeng immediately threw his chopsticks down and stood up. This topic was taboo. By mentioning it at a time like this, Yun Xiling had basically stepped on Yun Yuanfeng's weakest point. He'd also wanted a son, but unfortunately, he'd only had daughters after his second baby and only son had been miscarried. Since he had no son, he'd decided to cultivate his daughters to allow them to marry well and then use their marriages to strengthen his own position in the business world. Although his eldest daughter had been raised in the countryside, she was able to help him grab onto the Jiang family. When she had come home, he'd noticed that his eldest daughter was just as beautiful as his second daughter. She was also able to help him latch onto the Jiang and Qin families. At the very critical time of him being selected for a promotion, she was basically his lucky star. Yun Xiling had a heart condition, so it wouldn't be easy for her to marry well. Yun Chuhan was reticent and didn't stand out from others. Although her grades were good, her looks were much less remarkable than her older sisters. She only had knowledge, and in the age where appearances were everything, knowledge didn't mean much at all. So now he pinned all his hopes on Yun Shi and also wanted to see all three sisters support each other. However, this spoiled daughter was completely useless. Liang Xiuqin also stood up as she began to defend her precious daughter and shoot glares at the main culprit, Yun Shi. Just look at you. You angered your dad as soon as he came home. Must you have to make your sister sick from anger? How could you act like this as her older sister? How did your uncle and aunt educate you? Did they teach you to steal other people's things? Do you even know manners or have any shame? Yun Yuanfeng shot Liang Xiuqin another warning glance when he heard her speak. As their mother, she didn't know how to speak or read the situation at all. Although there was nothing wrong with siding with Yun Xiling, she couldn't scold Yun Shi like that either. However, Liang Xiuqin was riled up and couldn't be stopped. She completely ignored Yun Yuanfeng's warning and began to lecture Yun Shi. Mom, I don't think I ever said anything. Yun Xiling's things cannot be stolen by others, but does that mean she and Liang Xini are allowed to steal my things? One of them wants the marriage to the Jiang family, while the other wants to replace me as the eldest heiress of the Yun family. Weren't you happy to see those things happen? How can I act like this as the older sister? You've never educated or even raised me in all these years, and now you're so eager to stand up for Yun Xiling. Did you ever consider that I'm your daughter too? She's lived in this home for so many years, while I was in the countryside for over 10 years. Why do I have to let her have her way as soon as I come back? I'm her older sister. It's all your fault. If you hadn't cursed her, how could she have gotten this illness? Her heart condition is hereditary, and I remember that grandmother also passed away from this same illness. It is inherited every other generation, so you should be glad that you didn't inherit yourself. Otherwise, you'd also become my dad's burden. Yun Xiling crawled out of your own stomach, so why are you blaming me for inheriting this illness? Aren't you too funny, envy, you? Liang Xiuqin's face was completely pale, insubordination. How did I give birth to such a rude daughter? You dare to argue back. You're a star of death, and this family only turned out like this because of you. I shouldn't have given birth to you in the first place. Yun Shi slowly stood up. When she looked at her mother, there was only a cold and blank aloofness in her eyes. In her previous life, Yun Xiling had stood at the door, laughing smugly and heartlessly as her mother poured sulfuric acid on Yun Shi's face. In this lifetime, she wouldn't be such a coward anymore. Dad, I'm going upstairs first. She truly didn't want to waste any more breath on them, so she turned to go upstairs. Her mother's superstitious beliefs would never change in all her life, so Yun Shi didn't care to help her correct it. When she walked halfway to the door, she suddenly recalled something and turned to her father to say, Dad, I'm going to be starting school soon. Can you see if you can ask someone to help with my transfer? She didn't want to rely on her mom for something like that. Okay, don't worry about it. Dad will take care of it for you. Yun Yuanfeng didn't dare to delay things, and it came to her education since it implicated her future prospects, after all. Yun Shi nodded before going upstairs to read books. She needed to get ample rest to climb up Tianyu Mountain tomorrow morning.